We all have a worldview. This set of assumptions about our reality provides the basis by which we live, move, and have our being. That is, they inform every decision and action that we take, and how we interpret the world. This obviously has implications for educators. Personal worldview influences everything from how content is presented to how students are seen and responded to in the classroom. Student worldviews inform interpretation of content, behaviour and attention, and even how the student perceives the teacher's actions. If worldview is so important to teaching, what perspectives are informing our education system? This review begins to dig deeper into the worldview underpinning the Alice Springs, or Mparntwe, educational declaration, the relationship to a Christ-centred worldview, and some of the indigenous worldview perspectives evident. We'll also look a little into the design process and what elements of listening, imagining, and creating have been used to enable the voices of students in the declaration. The Mparntwe Educational Declaration, referred to here as the Declaration, outlines the national vision for Australian education. Mparntwe is the Cianci name for Alice Springs, reflecting the value of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures. The overall vision of the document is to support and encourage every student to reach their potential. Two goals focus on excellence and equity in education and the development of attributes in young Australians, including confidence, creativity, lifelong learners, and active and informed community members. From this overall vision and goals, 11 areas for action are listed and elaborated on within the document, of which a number of themes emerge. The four overarching themes emerging from the Declaration align with the values of Humanism, a worldview focused on finding personal fulfillment, equality, and upholding science as the best method for determining knowledge. In education, it takes a holistic approach on the cognitive, social, and emotional aspects of humanity. In exploring each theme, these humanist perspectives will be compared to a Christ-centered and indigenous worldviews. The first action area of the Declaration describes the aspirations to develop stronger partnerships between students and the community. The consequent contribution to society is linked to students' well-being. Humanism is based on finding fulfillment. For many, this is found in relationships. The Humanist Manifesto, version 3, emphasises the role of community participation and societal improvement to meet this need for human fulfillment. The importance of relational fulfillment and finding meaning in community is similarly reflected in an Indigenous worldview. Indigenous peoples fit into a collectivist culture where self-actualization is achieved through meeting societal developmental needs. This fulfillment extends to land and spirituality. Cultural leader Carl Slab explains that everything that makes us Aboriginal is connected to spirituality. Though the Declaration describes aspirations for culturally supportive environments, little reference to spirituality is mentioned in the document, an obvious indication of the humanist presupposition that humanity is all there is. The Bible describes God creating humans in his image. The world prior to the fall was a relational world, where God walked in the garden with Adam and Eve, and creatures existed in harmony. The whole story of the Old Testament post-fall leads to Jesus coming, restoring humanity's relationship with God. Fulfillment is found in relationship with him and in taking this message of reconciliation to the world. In the classroom, developing stronger partnerships aligns with the Christian's responsibility to reflect Jesus, showing love to others and caring for those around us. In order to love their students, the Christian teacher's task extends to guiding them in finding their fulfillment in a relationship with Christ. A holistic perspective of development is characteristic of humanist education. Action areas 3 to 6 focus on cognitive, social, and emotional development from early childhood to high school. While spiritual development is mentioned briefly in the second goal of the Declaration, it's notably absent from these action areas. Financial and entrepreneurial skills are listed as important tools equipping students for further study or meaningful employment. The underlying presupposition points to fulfillment in career and qualifications. A focus on lifelong learning supports the humanist view of knowledge being continually constructed. This balance between equipping students for fulfilling careers, as well as nurturing students' social and emotional development, represents the core values behind humanist education. Contrasted with indigenous perspectives, the humanist goals here are characteristic of the individualistic culture in which the worldview has been formed. The holistic perspectives of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people include connection to the land and to each other. The spirituality that is so essential to humanity from both an indigenous and biblical worldview are notably missing. A biblical understanding of humanity encompasses all aspects of our being. Created to reflect the image of God, humans are physical, emotional, spiritual, social, and cognitive beings. As instructed by God and modelled by Jesus, we are to lovingly care for people's needs from this holistic perspective. Educators are to care for students by considering every aspect of their being. Though this aligns with the Declaration's views, the Christian presupposition is that spiritual life is inseparably integrated into the physical. Thus, the spiritual development of the child is an essential aspect of holistic education. A fundamental concept for humanists is the belief that knowledge is continually constructed. Science is considered the basis for understanding reality and is constantly changing as more evidence becomes available. Action areas 2, 7, 8, and 11 demonstrate the high value placed on science and data in the Declaration. Attention is focused on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Data and science are assumed to be the only method for ensuring high standards of teaching practice. There's an emphasis on lifelong learning, knowledge construction that's constantly developing through their education. In contrast, an understanding of science for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people comprises their relationship to and responsibilities within the environment. As highlighted by Lynette Tasman, the indigenous law never changes. This law contains not only ways of behaving, but their understanding of the world and their responsibilities to it. While Western science is preoccupied with continual improvement, Indigenous culture is content with what they know in order to keep things the same, sustaining the world for future generations. The Bible, our source of truth, is constant. Though we will always glean new insights as God reveals more to us, the truth never changes. It's inspired by God, who always remains the same. But science is not contradictory of Christianity. Exploring and discovering more of the world points us to God. John Bloom, professor at Biloela University, Christian and scientist, explains, "The trend I see over time is that the more we study and understand the creation through science, the more clearly we see that it must be the handiwork of God. No series of accidents can ever replace skill. From telescope to microscope, God's creation is declaring His glory." Science also gives us insight into God's character, deepening our understanding of Him. Scientific principles, reflection, and improvement are valued in God's Word. We are encouraged to question and challenge one another, to use the mind that we have been given, not afraid to be curious. Science is a valuable subject for teaching students of God's glory, and constant reflection and improvement important for continually improving and refining teaching practices. The equality of human beings is a foundational assumption for humanists. Action areas 9 and 10 describe the ambitions to address the educational disparity faced by groups at risk of educational disadvantage, including Indigenous students. Educational achievement and community engagement is needed to achieve their potential. This perspective on finding fulfillment in community participation is characteristic of humanism. Targeted support for those at educational disadvantage aligns with a humanistic worldview, catering to individual needs. There is a notable absence of God to solve issues of inequality. The underlying assumption of humanity solving its own problems runs as an undercurrent here. The idea of human collaboration is consistent with the deeply relational worldview of indigenous Australians. However, their own spirituality, a core aspect of their identity, is notably missing. For Christians, human worth comes from being made as a reflection of God's own image. As image bearers, we inherit His characteristics. We love others because God first loved us. However, though we are fearfully and wonderfully made, there is no one righteous. We destroyed the world and God redeemed it. It's still broken, but humans can't fix it themselves. We can only work to right the wrongs of humanity with God's help through Him. Though this will never be fully achieved until Jesus returns, where He will right all wrongs for eternity. Christian educators are to treat the disadvantaged with love and dignity as God's children, giving special consideration as Jesus Himself did to the poor and lowly. Only allowing Jesus to work through us can we come truly love the disadvantaged, treating them as equals and understanding their worth. To recognize that their potential is only reached by finding their identity in Him, working towards that end to be His witnesses in their lives. The ACD&B model is an established design rubric used in program development to create a desired change. The framework involves the basic processes of listening, A, imagining, C, and creating, D and B, to move towards a vision. The process involves establishing the dream for the future, and then listening to multiple perspectives to outline a clear idea of the present situation. A feedback loop begins as this information is used to imagine ideas to get the vision, C, and creating little steps to get there, D. In the creation of the declaration, an extensive listening process involved consultation with students, teachers, and the community through discussion at dedicated events, at which over 900 people attended, as well as over 250 submissions in response to draft declarations. Gaining multiple perspectives on the current situation, it was determined that the current Melbourne Declaration was working to achieve the vision of the New South Wales education system and was used as a basis for this declaration. A number of drafts were developed, D, and presented for further consultation. This extensive process of listening to what was believed to be working and putting a number of drafts forward for feedback ensured students' perspectives were accounted for. The declaration describes a vision of an education system to meet their goals and achieve their potential, ensuring student voices continue to be heard. Though the Declaration establishes a worthy vision to support students to be the very best they can be, it's important to understand the worldview underpinning the document. The 4 themes underpinning the areas for action outlined in the document establish a fulfillment outside of Christ, a holistic perspective without considering spiritual development, an assumption of science alone as a source of knowledge that continually changes, and the presupposition that humanity alone can solve the problems of this broken world. While the Declaration has valid and useful action items, the Christian educator's responsibility is to reflect Christ to their students, loving them as His children and pointing them to obtaining their fulfillment in Him.